The open road. It represents freedom, adventure, the possibility of escaping your everyday life and disappearing into the vast expanse of the unknown. But what happens when that unknown turns sinister? This is a collection of 5 true hitchhiking horror stories that prove the kindness of strangers can sometimes be a terrifying facade. We'll hear about a college student who accepted a ride from a seemingly harmless individual, only to find themselves trapped in a terrifying game of cat and mouse. A lone traveler stranded in the middle of nowhere, at the mercy of a driver whose behavior becomes increasingly erratic and unsettling. Stay with me until the very end to discover what common thread ties these stories together, because this knowledge might one day save your life. Our first story takes us back to 1982, to the sun-drenched streets of Southern California. A young woman named Sarah, a bright and ambitious college student, was heading home for the summer break. She decided to hitchhike, a common practice at the time, thinking she could save some money and enjoy the open road. A beat-up blue van pulled over, driven by a man who seemed friendly enough. He introduced himself as Ted, and with a charming smile and easy demeanor, he assured Sarah he was heading in the same direction. Sarah, though initially hesitant, was disarmed by Ted's friendly demeanor and climbed into the van. They chatted casually for the first few miles, discussing their plans for the summer and listening to the radio crackle with classic rock hits. But as the miles turned into hours, and the familiar scenery was replaced by desolate stretches of highway, a knot of unease began to tighten in Sarah's stomach. Ted's cheerful facade started to crack, replaced by an unsettling intensity. His eyes lingered a little too long, his jokes became laced with a subtle, uncomfortable darkness, and his casual conversation drifted towards topics that made Sarah's skin crawl. Sarah's gut screamed at her to get out, to find a way to escape the confines of the van, but they were miles from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but endless fields and the scorching desert sun. She had to act, had to find a way to survive. Our next story takes us to the rugged landscapes of the Australian outback, where the vastness of the land can be both beautiful and unforgiving. The endless stretches of barren land, dotted with sparse vegetation, create a scene that is both mesmerizing and daunting. Mark, a seasoned traveler with a thirst for adventure, had always dreamed of exploring this remote part of the world. He was on a solo backpacking trip across the country, determined to experience the raw beauty and challenges of the outback firsthand. He had heard countless stories about the kindness of strangers in the outback, tales of unexpected friendships and the unspoken bond among travelers. The camaraderie that existed between those who dared to conquer its unforgiving terrain was legendary, a testament to the human spirit. He set out on foot, his backpack heavy with supplies, each step a new chapter in his journey, his spirit soaring with anticipation. The thrill of the unknown and the promise of adventure kept him moving forward. Days turned into weeks, and Mark found himself embracing the solitude of the outback, the vast emptiness becoming a companion of sorts. The silence was broken only by the howling wind and the crunch of gravel beneath his boots, a symphony of isolation. But as his supplies dwindled and the scorching sun beat down relentlessly, the reality of his situation began to set in. Mark knew he needed to find a ride. The vast distances and harsh conditions made it clear that he couldn't continue on foot much longer. A rusty pickup truck, its paint peeling under the relentless sun, appeared on the horizon, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. It rumbled to a stop beside him, the engine's growl a welcome sound. Behind the wheel sat a weathered man named Mick, his face etched with the lines of a life lived under the harsh Australian sky. His eyes, though tired, held a spark of kindness and resilience. Mick offered Mark a ride to the next town, a small outpost hours away, and Mark gratefully accepted, feeling a wave of relief. The thought of reaching a place with other people, food and water was a comforting one. Mick, initially quiet, opened up as they drove, sharing tales of his adventures in the outback, his encounters with wildlife, and his deep respect for the land. His stories painted a vivid picture of life in the outback, filled with both beauty and danger. But as the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the barren landscape, a subtle shift occurred in Mick's demeanor. His once bright eyes seemed to cloud over, his easy smile replaced by a twitching grimace. Mark tried to ignore the change, attributing it to fatigue or the isolation of the outback getting to the old man, but deep down, a primal fear began to stir within him, a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He considered confronting Mick, demanding to be taken back to the main road, but something in the old man's eyes, a glint of madness that sent shivers down Mark's spine, told him that doing so would be a grave mistake. The outback, with all its beauty and danger, had one more challenge in store for him. Mark's journey was far from over, and the true test of his courage and resilience was just beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, and Mark could only hope that his instincts would guide him through the challenges that lay ahead. The outback had a way of revealing one's true character, and Mark was about to discover just how deep his own strength ran. Chapter 3. The Nighttime Hitchhiker. Our next story takes place on a desolate highway in the American Midwest where the darkness can feel as vast and unforgiving as the open ocean. The kind of place where the horizon seems to stretch on forever, and the only company you have is the occasional rustle of the wind and the distant howl of a coyote. A young woman named Emily found herself stranded on the side of the road, her car dead, her phone with no signal, and a growing sense of dread creeping up her spine. She had hoped for a quick trip, but fate had other plans. She had been driving for hours, the monotony of the highway lulled her into a false sense of security. The rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt had almost been hypnotic, making her forget just how isolated she truly was. The sun had set hours ago, and the only light came from her car's hazard lights, blinking feebly in the encroaching darkness. The feeble glow seemed to be swallowed by the night, offering little comfort. Every car that passed, every set of headlights that appeared in the distance brought a flicker of hope, only to be met with disappointment as they sped by, leaving Emily alone in the cold, unforgiving night. She waved desperately, but no one seemed to notice or care. Hours passed and Emily's hope began to dwindle with each passing car. The cold seeped into her bones and the isolation weighed heavily on her mind. Just when she was about to give in to despair, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. They seemed to move slower than the others, giving her a glimmer of hope. This time, Emily stepped into the road, waving her arms frantically, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and desperation. She could feel her pulse in her ears, each beat echoing her urgent need for help. The car slowed, its brakes squealing in the quiet night, and finally came to a stop a few feet in front of her. The sound of the engine idling was a welcome break from the oppressive silence. Emily approached cautiously, her hand hovering over the pepper spray she kept in her pocket. She had always been cautious, and tonight was no exception. The car was an old sedan, its paint faded, its windows tinted, making it impossible to see the driver. The vehicle had an air of mystery, adding to her anxiety. She hesitated for a moment, her instincts screaming at her to run, but the cold, the darkness, and the overwhelming feeling of vulnerability outweighed her fear. She knew she had to take a chance. She knocked timidly on the driver's side window, and after what felt like an eternity, the window slowly rolled down, revealing a woman in her late 50s, her face etched with wrinkles, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and weariness. The older woman seemed just as wary as Emily. Emily explained her situation, her voice trembling with a mixture of cold and fear. She tried to keep her composure, but the night's events had taken their toll. The woman, who introduced herself as Martha, listened patiently, her gaze never leaving Emily's face. Martha's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to Emily's frazzled state, offering a small but significant comfort. Chapter 4. The Desperate Escape. Our next story takes us to the winding mountain roads of the Pacific Northwest, where dense forests and towering peaks create an atmosphere of both breathtaking beauty and unsettling isolation. The landscape is a mix of serene tranquility and hidden dangers, a place where one can easily lose themselves both physically and emotionally. A young man named Daniel was on a road trip, seeking solace and adventure in the wake of a painful breakup. He had hoped that the journey would help him clear his mind and find some peace, but the further he drove, the more he felt the weight of his loneliness. He had been driving for days. His only companions, the music on his radio and the ghosts of his past that he couldn't seem to outrun. Each song that played seemed to echo his own feelings of loss and regret, making the miles stretch on endlessly. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows that stretched like grasping fingers across the winding road, Daniel realized he was hopelessly lost. The once beautiful scenery now seemed menacing, the shadows playing tricks on his mind. His phone had died hours ago, and the map he had relied on had disintegrated into a useless mess after being soaked by a leaky water bottle. He felt a growing sense of panic as he realized just how isolated he was. Just when his hope began to dwindle, he spotted a small diner, its neon sign a beacon of warmth and humanity in the growing darkness. The sight of it brought a glimmer of hope to his weary heart. He pulled into the gravel parking lot, relieved to have found a place to rest, recharge, and seek directions. The diner seemed like a sanctuary, a place where he could gather his thoughts and make a plan. As he stepped out of his car, the crisp mountain air filling his lungs, he noticed a man sitting on a bench outside the diner smoking a cigarette. The man seemed to be a fixture of the place, as if he belonged to the very fabric of the mountains. The man, who appeared to be in his late 40s, looked up as Daniel approached, his face weathered and tanned, his eyes a piercing blue that seemed to see right through Daniel. There was something both comforting and unsettling about his gaze. He introduced himself as Frank, and with a gruff, but not unfriendly demeanor he asked Daniel if he was lost. His voice was rough, like gravel, but there was a hint of kindness in it. Daniel explained his situation, his frustration evident in his voice. He felt a mix of relief and embarrassment as he recounted his misadventures. Frank listened intently, taking a long drag from his cigarette and exhaling a plume of smoke that swirled around his head like a ghostly halo. His expression was thoughtful, as if he was weighing Daniel's words carefully. When Daniel was finished, Frank offered him a solution. His voice was steady and reassuring, a stark contrast to Daniel's earlier panic. He knew the area well, he said, and he was heading in the same direction as Daniel. He pointed out the route on a map, his finger tracing the winding roads with practiced ease. He'd be happy to give him a ride, save him the trouble of navigating the treacherous mountain roads in the dark. Daniel felt a wave of gratitude wash over him, knowing that he wouldn't have to face the night alone. Chapter 5. The Unseen Danger. Our final story takes us to the sun-drenched highways of the American Southwest, where the heat can distort reality, and the vast distances between towns can make you feel utterly alone. Maria, a young photographer, was on a road trip, documenting the beauty of the desert landscape and the people who called it home. She had been driving for hours, her camera filled with breathtaking images of towering cacti, abandoned ghost towns, and the vibrant colors of the desert sky. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretched across the barren landscape, Maria realized she was running low on gas. She checked her map, but the nearest town was still miles away, and the needle on her gas gauge was dipping dangerously close to empty. She cursed herself for not filling up at the last town, her excitement over capturing the perfect sunset shot overriding her better judgment. Just when she was starting to panic, she spotted a car parked on the side of the road ahead. A young woman, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her face hidden behind a pair of sunglasses, was leaning against the car, her thumb outstretched in a universal sign of distress. Maria pulled over, her heart going out to the stranded motorist. As she got closer, she noticed the woman's car was a sleek convertible, its paint job gleaming even in the fading light. It didn't look like the kind of car that would break down in the middle of nowhere. Maria rolled down her window, asking if everything was all right. The woman turned towards her, and Maria was taken aback by her beauty. Her eyes were a startling green, her smile warm and disarming. Chapter 6. The Crucial Detail. Each of these stories, as chilling as they are, share a single terrifying commonality. None of the victims contacted anyone before accepting a ride. They vanished into the unknown without a trace, leaving no one aware of their intended route or their potential savior-turned-captor. Always trust your instincts, be aware of your surroundings, and never underestimate the importance of letting someone know where you are going and when you expect to arrive. It might just save your life. If you're